Welcome to the Overcoming Imposter Syndrome webinar. I'm your coach for today, Gary Kishbaugh with Compass Business Coaching. And by the end of this webinar, you will be able to identify what overcoming imposter syndrome is, as well as the different types, so that you can help identify on your team or even yourself that these might be affecting you as it affects most people from one time to another. So let's begin. Most people have moments of self-doubt, and that's normal. But when it's temporary feelings of negativity, that's okay. But when it becomes constant, then you have a bit of a challenge. That's where you may feel that you're not worthy of the titles or the achievements you've earned. And at that point, you need to make a change. Right? Now, studies suggest that 70% of people who experience imposter syndrome experience at some point in their career. So 70% of the people that you work with at some time or another have experienced it. Today, we're going to discuss what exactly it looks like and how to overcome the symptoms so that you can stop worrying so much. It'll also, if you're a manager or a leader, it'll enable you to identify some of these traits in your team members and be able to coach them through it. So what is imposter syndrome? Well, it's a psychological pattern of self-doubt. It's where the individual will disregard their accomplishments and they have this persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud, right? In other words, it's a phenomenon that reflects a belief that you're not adequate or you could potentially be incompetent in certain areas. Now, it's not actually an official diagnosis by psychologists, but it's recognized as a phenomenon that can lead to recognized disorders such as depression. So you're asking yourself, why should you know about this? Well, many times team members are given new titles, additional tasks, responsibilities, and they may not have the proper training, guidance, and especially positive reinforcement. This can lead to a feeling of inadequacy and wondering if they're the right person that can do this job. So this prepares you to lead your team better and also to address it in case on the issues that you feel from time to time. Now, the original researchers were, it was identified in 1978, and there were Pauline Rose Clance and Susan Himes. They're both clinical psychologists. And in their research originally, they theorized that women were uniquely affected by the imposter syndrome. But since that point, it's been determined that all genders are affected by imposter syndrome. So let me ask you this. Maybe you haven't openly thought to yourself that you're a fraud or imposter, but perhaps have you ever brushed off your success as luck or being in the right place at the right time? Does this ever sound like you, or have you heard a team member do this? So let's ask, why are these thoughts so harmful? Well, they're problematic because they undermine your self-confidence, and it can hold you back from achieving your goals and for any future success. When we're having feelings of inadequacy, what thoughts go through our mind? And who's our own worst critic? Usually a lot of these thoughts are not external, they're coming internally. Now, looking at the syndrome itself, there are subcategories, and we're going to go through them. It can take various forms, right, depending on the person's background, personalities, and other circumstances. So Dr. Valerie Young has categorized the imposter syndrome into 5 subgroups, and we'll be covering each one of them. The perfectionist, superwoman or superman, the natural genius, the soloist, the expert, okay? And we'll go through these so you'll have a chance if you want to write them down, but we'll discuss them now. All right, first is the perfectionist. Very common. The perfectionist is, and imposter syndrome go hand in hand because the personality type sets extraordinarily high goals or standards for themselves, right? They're constantly worrying about measuring up to these goals. You may be a perfectionist if you've ever been accused of being a micromanager, if you've ever had difficulty delegating. And when you do you feel frustrated and disappointed in the results of the people you delegated to? Have you ever accused yourself of not being good enough when you don't reach the goals you set for yourself? Have you ever felt, though, as if you and your work has to be 100% perfect 100% of the time? For this personality type, success is rarely satisfying because they always believe they could have done a better job no matter what it is. They've always do. This is neither productive nor healthy. And I would recommend you write this down. Perfection is an illness. Striving for excellence is a goal. So where these people would start off striving for excellence, they've gotten to the point where it's nothing but being perfectionist. And when it is, this isn't healthy for them or for the teammates around them. The superwoman or superman. And I'm sure we've all experienced each one of these type of people, or we may have been each one of these types of people, right? These are the people who are convinced that they don't measure up to their real life colleagues. This subgroup often tries to push themselves harder to measure up. They're often referred to as workaholics. So if you've seen a workaholic, they're superwoman, superman syndrome. Okay? You might looking at yourself or a team member to see if indeed they're a super person if you stay later than the rest of the team, even past the point where you've completed the day's necessary work. Have you gotten stressed when you're not working and find downtime wasteful, almost like an energy that it has to keep you driving? Have you let your hobbies and passions fall by the wayside, instead dedicating your spare time to work and more work? Um, have you felt like you truly haven't earned your title? So you feel pressured to work longer and harder than everybody around you so that you can prove that you belong. Workaholics are become addicted to the validation, right? The validation that comes from being busy and not actually from the work themselves. Now, the natural genius. Well, this is somebody who believes they should automatically be good at everything they do the first time they try it. And if it doesn't come easily or if they can't get it right, they immediately go to judgment issues and say, well, I'm not sure if this is for me. So you may be a natural genius if you're used to excelling without much effort, or you have a track record of getting straight A's. You were frequently told as a child that you were the smart one in your family or your peer group. You dislike the idea of a mentor because you feel as though you can handle things yourself. Um, but sometimes your confidence crumbles when you're faced with a setback. We see this actually many times in professional athletes. That's why the sports psychology is so strong, right? You often avoid challenges because it's uncomfortable for you to try something new. Our next subgroup is the soloist. It's okay to be independent, but when you push people away because you want to prove your own worth, you may fall into this category. So how would you know? Well, if you feel a really strong need to accomplish things on your own. I don't need anyone's help. Nobody can do it as well as I can. The second symptom could be is that you often say that your requests are in terms of the requirements of the project rather than you as an individual. In other words, something needs to be completed rather than I need your help. And the soloist is constantly trying to prove their worth by doing all the work on their own. And the fifth and final one is the expert. These people believe that their competence is dependent on how much they know or what they can do. They assume that they'll never know enough, and they fear being exposed as unknowledgeable or possibly even inexperienced. This could be you or someone you know if you shy away from applying for jobs unless you meet every single educational requirement. Are you continually seeking out training or certifications because you think you need those certifications to improve your skills? You may have been in a role for some time, but you still relate to feeling as if you don't know enough. Doesn't mean you don't think you're experienced, but you don't know enough. And a lot of times it holds you back. You may be an expert if you immediately become uncomfortable when someone calls you an expert. So these are the 5 subgroupings. But what causes it? Well, it can be all kinds of factors outside of it. It could be things such as environment or institutionalized discrimination. They both can play a major role. Now, having sense of belonging fosters confidence. If you're in an environment where people don't embrace you, people don't look like you, they don't sound like you, or they don't think like you, the less confidence you might feel. And you could be very well educated. For example, someone who may have a bachelor's degree is surrounded by people that are PhDs or surrounded by people that are master's degrees. And that causes some feelings of insecurity because even though they're very educated, they don't have those further certifications. But the good news is there is hope. There's no single answer for why people experience imposter syndrome. Some experts will pin it on personality traits, while other experts will focus on childhood memories, while a third group will say on behavioral causes. Regardless what the causes are, there are some ways to work through them. And if you're managing a team and coaching, this is especially important for you to help get the most out of your team members. The first one is celebrate your achievements. Make the point to celebrate the awesome things you do the same way you celebrate the accomplishments of a loved one. When I'm coaching my clients, I ask them how would they celebrate if their child did something. Now I'm saying have an adult version of that, but you should celebrate just as often. It's just as important for the psyche, for you and or your team members. Throw a party, go out for drinks, treat yourself to something you love, right? So if you love doing going to the movies, you did something great, I'm going to reward myself for going to the movies because I did a great job. Okay? And make sure you cheer yourself on as many ways as possible because you'll start rewiring the way your brain thinks and you'll become much more aware that you're doing an awesome job. Another way is to practice self-love mantras. You say, what is that? Well, it's repeating things to yourself to boost your confidence. We recommend using I am statements. I am a good leader. I am competent. I am experienced. Right? I am able to solve my customers' challenges. Those types of comments. And we recommend doing it twice a day in front of a mirror. And start off with at least 20 of them. And it can grow from there. But the biggest point is not to say I will or I'm going to, but I am. This is who I am, positive and reaffirming. Remember, your brain is very much like a hard drive. It stores what you put in it. So if you put comments and statements and things of self-doubt, for example, how many times in our life going, oh, I should have done that better. Why did I make that mistake? And even some of us get some negative speech where we call ourselves names. Oh, you dummy. Well, guess what? Your brain stores that. So we have to spend time to pull that out of your brain and replace it with things that are very positive. No one's perfect. You have to tell yourself these positive, uplifting things whenever you feel negative thoughts or doubts creeping in. This is another method for rewiring it because when you shift it from negative to positive, your confidence level changes dramatically. Now, one of the things that I'd recommend is there's a great video. It's got a little coarse language on it, so I apologize for that in advance, but it's called This is Simple, This is Easy, This is Fun. And it's by a gentleman from Australia, and it's how to get team members focused on enjoying their work and getting positive, but it also works on a personal basis. I've conducted many seminars where I've had people do that and they've come back and told me it's actually changed their life. I've had several of them in tears just by using that simple phrase. So if you would feel like Googling it and search for it, it's called This is Simple, This is Easy, This is Fun by Kerwin Rae, R-A-E. Okay? Now, be very mindful of the way you treat yourself. It's okay to be humble, but if you're rejecting praise or compliments, you're not doing yourself any favors, right? So we need to start being nicer to ourselves. Think of it this way, if someone complimented a friend, you wouldn't step in and say, no, it was nothing. It's not a big deal. Of course not. Well, you need to start treating yourself the exact same way. And also, learn to take mistakes in stride. Mistakes are a natural part of learning. Thomas Edison said, I haven't failed. I just found 10,000 ways that won't work. I have a tendency of telling all my clients I never learned anything by doing it right. The lessons I've learned best are ones I've made mistakes on. That's okay. Everybody makes mistakes, regardless of how perfect they may seem. The trick moving forward and doing a better job next time is not to dwell on what went wrong, but instead what steps I have to do to make it positive. Sometimes mistakes are actually a blessing in disguise. Can you think of any mistake in your life that actually make it better? I have several that I can, but one of the biggest ones from an institutional basis was 3M. 3M was attempting to create a super glue. And in the process, they found an adhesive that wouldn't stick permanently. It was only temporary. And that became Post-it notes, which I've never done the research, but my guess is it's probably a larger market than all the super glue companies combined. So, but learn how to take those mistakes in stride. And one of the big ones is act before you're ready. There's never a perfect time to do something. So, as they say, rip off the Band-Aid. Do whatever it is you're afraid of, because no one's ever 100% ready to do anything. And if they are, many times the time has passed. So make sure you move forward, and then you'll find a way to make it work if you're committed. And it'll be a great growth opportunity for you. Now, the next slide, especially in today's generation, this is very important. Don't count on external validation. No one, not even your boss, should have more power than you to make yourself feel good or bad. You can't control the way other people will treat you or react to your work. If you're always striving to get somebody's stamp of approval in order to feel good, about what you've accomplished, you may never get what you're looking for. Don't let that drain hold you back from continuing. The founder of Action Coach, Brad Sugars, makes the statement that other people's opinions of you are none of your business. And he's right. We have an entire generation of people that their worth for the day and their self-worth depends on whether somebody or how many people gave them a thumbs up on a social media post. And that is a horrible way to go through life. So do you place a lot of value on external validation? Most people do. And everyone could benefit by working on this one. Don't keep focusing on external validation. So if you're feeling down about yourself, right, for not doing enough, make a list of all the things you've done. If you have the opportunity, ask a coworker or a loved one who's up to date with your life and ask them to help create a list. One of the things we do in coaching is we ask our clients to list everything that impacts them that we've accomplished each week and keep that tally running. Because if you don't, with most high achievers, which is what my coaching clients are, is they have a tendency of forgetting that and moving forward. And don't get me wrong, we don't want to dwell in the past. But what we do want to do is we want to celebrate those. So when they look back at a year and go, wow, we really got a lot done. Absolutely, and it's time to celebrate that. So moving forward, or they may look back on a quarter and say the same thing. So make sure you keep a list. So often we remember the bad stuff and let us overwhelm us. But if you remember to write down a list and keep the things you've done that's positive, you then provide yourself with evidence that you're doing great things. And I use the word evidence because everything up until this point is a feeling. But if you keep a list of what you're doing, then it's actual physical evidence. Another way is talk about your feelings. Sometimes we all need a little extra support from an external source. There's never shame for reaching out to somebody. You can turn to a loved one if they have the ability. You can, if they don't, you can ask a counselor, a psychologist, a mentor, join an online forum, or particularly in the case of business, as a business coach. We spend a lot of our time working with our clients. And one of the advantages we have is that we are not in their business. We see their business from a different perspective. So where they're getting caught up and getting consumed by maybe perfection, maybe other issues, we're able to help them and guide them through it. So I would recommend talk to a coach. Every business should have a coach. I may not be the right coach for every business, but every business should have a coach. Okay. So let me ask you, I'm going to check with you and see how you're feeling. We've had some time to look at some of the information that we went over. Are you worried, optimistic, somewhere in between? Do you have somebody on your team that you're thinking about saying, oh, this may be so-and-so? I can see some of these symptoms in this individual. One of the things I recommend is having a mentoring program, both in external, being a coach, and internal within the organization. The reason being is most people won't walk up to their boss and say, I'm really not doing well. I feel like I'm a failure. But they will talk to a coworker. And what it does do, if you put the right team together, it helps both of the team members. One, they build a trust level and they can talk openly. And the second part is the other team member has a different perspective. You're being too hard on yourself. Maybe you might want to try it this way. So I highly recommend that. Just whatever you're doing, make sure you're encouraging open communication all the way so that no one ever feels overwhelmed or ill-equipped to complete their tasks. This is really something that, again, I can't stress enough. When someone's moving into a new position, making sure they understand what the expectations are clearly, and as well as that, helping training. I know you've done a great job. You may have been a great salesperson. You've been promoted to sales manager. Well, that's a whole different skill set. You may have been a great person at handling different accounting, but now they put you in charge of the finance department. Again, that's a different skill set. So if there's somebody on your team that you're giving into a larger, more significant role, make sure that you work with them consistently, and that'll minimize the imposter syndrome. What I would like to do is thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. I know, especially in the afternoon, things are going crazy. I hope you learned something very valuable, and I'm sure that you've seen at least one or more people that you work with and or yourself that fit parts of the imposter syndrome, and some very great strategies to overcome that. If you have any further questions to discuss, please feel free to reach out to me. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. And just remember, Gary has 2 R's in it, or you can email me, and my email address is on the screen, gary@compassbusinesscoach.com. And I'll help you any way I can. So again, I thank you for joining us, and make it a great week.